we want to address that before they get to dedicated, right? Because you'll have an NBME and you're like, I don't know, and I'm like, well, do you know why you're getting questions wrong?
Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Dr. Stephanie Brown. Dr. Brown brings over 20 years of educational experience spanning K through 12 and higher education with a doctorate in educational leadership from Wilmington University. She provides academic coaching to medical students on study skills and test-taking strategies, supervises learning specialists, and supports USMLE Step 1 and Step 2 preparation. What makes Dr. Brown unique is her systematic approach to early student outreach and her passion for helping high-performing students develop the learning strategies they've never needed before. She's also a published children's book author and founder of the I Am Educational series, dedicated to increasing representation of Black history and women's history in education. Dr. Brown, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. I feel honored meant to really verify or to confirm your readiness. I think it's easy for top performing students to think that they're ready from exam to exam because exam will only have cardio or poem. They'll be very isolated systems or disciplines, but a comprehensive exam that will have everything on it will really be a stamp on readiness before they enter dedicated so that they can say, confirm, yes, cardio is my best subject, or cardio is indeed my worst subjects. And that way students can go in with an idea of where they are instead of with a false sense of not only confidence, but knowledge about how they are doing. Because then if they go in to dedicated thinking that they're ready in all the systems and subjects and disciplines, then they will panic even more in that space and say, what happened? I was at a 90%. I went above the class average on all of my exams prior to dedicated. And they're surprised. So what we do in academic support, we start conversations before dedicated, like months before they get there. That way they can understand how to assess where they are with the exams. Where am I at in these subjects and disciplines? What areas do I need refresh and review on? What are my top 5 best? What are the ones that are in the middle? And especially, which ones are my weaker areas? That way they can get into dedicated with knowledge instead of surprise. I need help with everything because it brings more fear and panic into that space.
So it sounds like, people will go through and they'll do okay on their block exams, or because most schools, the block exams are written by professors and they're pretty different from like USMLE style questions. So that's already one difference. And I think I'm also hearing there's also the problem of, you're moving from a sort of a one sort of system to now every system. And so those are pretty big jumps. Is that right?
It is. And our students do so well. A lot of times they do really well on these exams. But once they see everything, it really reveals, do I know, understand, and more importantly, did I remember? Because we know medical students are like the top performing students. We're very biased about that. Medical students are just amazing students and they've been so their entire lives. So naturally, you will go into dedicated, oh, I'm ready. I don't need anything. I've done so well on my scores, my exams prior to dedicated. I'm going to persist with that same trajectory. Then you're saying, then your first NBME could be like a 45 and you are totally shocked. So I think for academic support, like we have to begin the conversations early, bring upperclassmen into the conversation as well so that they can say, you know what? I also thought that I knew everything that I was going to be ready, step ready in like 4 weeks opposed to 6 or 8. This is what I did before I got to dedicated. These are the resources that I use based on my learning style, because, we're fans of that. Align your resource with the learning style so that you can make sure, again, understand, and remember, and also bring in mentors if we need to, students who've already passed so that and also having students who had a different trajectory that maybe they started out in the 40s and 50s, but they got all the way to the 60, the 65 before they sat. Because some students will say, well, Dr. Brown, you're only giving These are tutors, so they've always been high performers. So again, you want to introduce students to students who've had a different story so that with all of that, they can come up with, okay, this is the reality of dedicated instead of their own interpretation of what dedicated will be.
I've heard that the best way to learn something is to learn it from someone who's not naturally good at it. So it makes total sense that you'd want to start, like learn from someone who started in the 40s and then got to the 60s or 70s. That's a much better sort of person because those skills are transferable as opposed to like the person that's just always been good at this. For those people, what is it that they're doing differently? Like, what did they do to go from like the 30s or 40s to like the 60s or 70s?
Yes, and you're probably going to love this. So what students will do is they have tracking like trackers. I'm a spreadsheet gal. I just believe you can change the world with a color coordinated spreadsheet. That's how I feel about spreadsheets. So what they will do is they will track their progress in their exams to really be able to numerically and visually identify with their own data where they are. And what I find that when students are tracking from exam to exam, like how am I doing with everything? Then they can go to dedicated space knowing where they are, like doing an assessment. Because you know what happens? Students will do, oh, I'll do UWorld. And it's like, you haven't had experience with these type of vignettes. So how is that a good assessment before you get into dedicated? Oh, Dr. Brown, I did a diagnostic or I did an NBME. And I'm like, and with not like that's not valid because it's your first one. So you don't even know what these vignettes are like. You don't know the question style. So how can that be a good assessment? So what we do is you use your test data before you get to dedicated and you track it and seeing if you're developing from system to subject and to discipline. You have to have some kind of a measuring tool to evaluate yourself. And that's what we do with our students, or we recommend.
So not everyone watching this is going to have a Dr. Brown, access to someone of your caliber and experience. What would you recommend? Like, so from a granular perspective, so like what kind of tests would you recommend that they take? How would you recommend that they sort of track this data in order to, like
That's a
make
great
these guys?
question. So what we do is we have like it's called a strengths and opportunities document after every exam. You probably had something similar, right? Like after your exam, you had something like a sheet. It was like numerical that had how many questions you got correct in following areas. So I ask my students to analyze that, like see where you are. But the second layer of that is really finding out why you got questions wrong. Is it a knowledge crack that you knew the diagnosis, you knew what was going on, but you missed one detail that led you to the wrong answer? Is it a knowledge gap, which is relative for medical students because you're constantly learning. You're learning everything about the world. But you're learning everything, right? And so it's like, is it that? You still don't know it yet. Or number three is it a testing issue? Are you changing your answers? Are you over analyzing, overthinking? Or sometimes are you underthinking? You think you know the answer, but it might not be correct. Or is your timing off? Are you trying so hard to get the answer right that you're doing it too quickly or you're taking too long? So those three areas, knowledge crack, knowledge gap, or a testing issue, we want to address that before they get to dedicated, right? Because you'll have an NBME and you're like, I don't know, and I'm like, well, do you know why you're getting questions wrong? And if most students are already tracking that, like when we say, we want you to start tracking stuff, the students that listen to us, they already know. So they can pull up their spreadsheet, they can pull up their whatever tracking method that they use to be able to pinpoint how they can improve from system to system or discipline or subject to subjects. That's like, no, and then if it's it's like a testing issue, we can work on students' deduction and their deductive reasoning and how they are arriving at the right answer. So it's layered, but I think the goal is starting early. I think it's a must. I think for every single academic support office in medical school, We have to find various ways to get students to have conversations at first, bring in upperclassmen. Students have been successful on step one with different stories, even handbooks. Many colleges have handbooks that give students guidelines and advice of what to do and how to do it. But I think the unknown is, or maybe an area of improvement is really helping students learn how to adjust in dedicated. How to say, okay, how to be comfortable. I think that's what it is. How to be comfortable with, I thought I knew it, but I really didn't. Like being comfortable with that and listening to someone and making the necessary change instead of thinking you already know what to do and you plateau, you're not growing, but you're refusing to accept that as a fact.
That almost sounds more like emotional intelligence.
Very good. Very
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say so too. And it could even be something as simple as just adjustment. Because you remember, if you're a high performing student or person, you're wrong, but not. And that's a good thing, right? You want to be around someone who is able to see something, they can target it, they can build it, they can create it, they can implement it, and they're right on target. We hire people for that, right? We hire them. But we have to also teach them how to adjust. Like when it doesn't go the way you hoped, I call this fixed growth because many students come into this space and say, okay, they think it's a fixed environment. I study, I get an A. I study, I do this, which that doesn't necessarily happen. So I liken this experience to fixed growth. Like with the growth, it even is discovery because you say, okay, I didn't know this. I thought I did. What will I do to adjust? And you will grow through that adjustment. So intelligence, emotional, yes. And I also think it's a matter of adapting, like wanting to adapt instead of being forced to adapt, right? Like coming to the realization and saying, I need to adapt instead of Dr. Brown and the deans and everybody is telling you, you must adapt, you must adapt, you must, just like Star Trek or something like that. It's similarly like the Borg.
So one of the things that people hire us to do is to help them to transform the way that they approach studying. And so especially in like sort of those high stakes environments where either the score is really low and they need to get, like they need to pass, or their score is kind of like middling, but they want to get really, really high because they want to get into something competitive. One of the things that we found is that people rarely know their biggest problem. They lack sort of that insight of like, this is my bottleneck. What have you found in that regard?
I think you are absolutely correct. And sometimes you don't want to know. And you think I think, and that's the thing about you have to come into medical school with the thought of this could be a different academic experience for me. Because without that, it's going to be business as usual and you will be utterly emotionally almost destroyed when you don't perform as well as you did prior to med school. So it's what I think a good idea to do for academic support is to really introduce the students early on before day one what this environment truly is and finding ways to do that, because if not, they're going to think that this is just going to be the same. And it is not on so many levels. And also, students also need to gather amongst each other because I think you probably agree with me too, that medical school is just a different environment. And if you haven't been in it, you don't really understand it. Like you have to be really careful about who you invite in your life almost because it is unyielding and you have to, being a medical student is demanding and you have to accept that demanding. And also those around you have to accept that as well. So it is really teaching students before they start, before day one, first year in med school, really delivering and explaining to them what type of environment this is. and therefore you can communicate the need to adapt when needed. And if you present that very gently, very thoughtfully, students can accept that instead of like, I'm a top performer.
So it sounds like a lot of your magic comes from sort of helping people normalize that it's not only okay, but it's actually a good thing to seek out help. And that help is really about taking one big problem and then breaking it down into sort of like really like the smaller problems, right? It's like, okay, you got a question wrong on UWorld, but like, why exactly? Was it a knowledge problem? Was it you just didn't read it correctly? Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah. Isn't that a great skill that they're going to need as they diagnose people? You know, like they assess the situation and they make a judgment, an assessment. You know more than about that than I do. But it's like it's a skill that's needed, but they're doing it with themselves year 1 to year 3, because year 4 is a little bit different, right? After step 2 is over. So it's just like we have to teach them it's okay to be in discovery instead of fixed environment. I study, I get an A. Like we have to say there will be times in your study life as a medical student, you will be in discovery land. Like, what are my, why? I did, let's talk about step. I did all these UWorld questions. I did 2 blocks. I did random, I did focus, I did tutor mode, I did untimed. And then my NBME number 12 for step 1 was still a 58. And I didn't even break the 60 barrier, like the 60 threshold yet. Why? So if they listen to us, I would say prior, or if we continue those conversations with year 1 to year 2, especially in November when they're preparing for dedicated somewhere in February, they will be a little bit more sensitive to adjusting, adapting when needed.
So, okay, so normalizing it early makes a big difference. What else? I mean, because this skill that you're talking about is like, that is the skill that we find makes the biggest difference as well. Is like, we had a student who literally failed step 1. And 2 months later, he just got very good at this skill of like breaking down, like, okay, like, why exactly did I get this wrong? Okay, so like, how am I going to drill myself so that I can get better at this particular kind of like, I'm having a hard time generating a different differential diagnosis. Or he got a 92% in 2 months after he failed. So, this is like this is the key that we find. What have you found is the most, makes the biggest difference in terms of a lot, like teaching students this skill?
Hmm. Sometimes it's confidence too. It's strategy and confidence, because I think those go hand in hand. Once you find what your strategy is, you will be confident. It's a fearful thing to get prepared for step, but it decreases a little bit once you find out how you learn. Again, the very first conversation we have with medical students is learn how you learn. And once that happens, and I would say the closer and closer they get to that moment, because it is a moment and it does take time. And as long as they understand that this is not fixed growth, this is not fixed, it's fixed growth. I will submit to the timeline. I will submit to discovery and adaption, and then I'll get there. So that's kind of the framework that I think that I'm always trying to help students with, like the timeline, like the journey, and seeing it that way is the better way to look at this unyielding, this demanding environment.
Yeah. Well, how does someone figure out what their like what works for them?
That's a great question. Come to us early, I would say. Like, don't wait until you don't do so well on exam. And which is sometimes that's why we have to have multiple conversations, whether it's live, like a Zoom session, or whether it's Tate already ready, whether it's bringing peers into it, upperclassmen, mentors. Like, we want students to come to us early so that we can start this. It's a new journey for students. For high performing students, it's just new. So we want them to come early. One thing that we do is for Acceptance Students Day, I am there to begin the conversation about what it is that we do. Because again, academic support sometimes has a bad rap as I don't know something, it's the walk of shame going to see Dr. Brown. But if we can share what academic support is, really learning how you learn based on your learning style, picking the right resource so that you can perform academically, learning how to adapt, assessing yourself regularly so that you can see where you are. If we have those conversations with students early, most likely once they get to dedicated, when it means the most, that's when it means the most. We want students to come early to us and see us differently. I think that's really what it is. Like, see me as you will go to Dr. Brown or a member of the team and have a discussion about strategy, not this hierarchy like, I'm the doctor, you're coming to be a doctor, there's this. No, you can come to me, we will talk about strategy and growth when needed. And we find that delivering academic support in that frame, in terms of a discussion about strategy, building your study plan, learning how you learn, my calendar is full. And I love that. The academic support team, and then we build trust. So when I have to have the hard conversation and say, you may need a step one course, then because the trust has already been built, then they can say, all right, Dr. Brown, this is a part of my growth journey. And I'll say, yes, indeed, indeed it is. Then they'll take it without the fear and the shame that comes along with that.
Right. In all fields, the highest performers, pretty much like, like LeBron James in basketball or, you know, whatever field, virtually all, like music performers, virtually all of them have coaches. Like the best people are the ones that have coaches. And so it's weird that in academics, like there's sort of this stigma. I think in part, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, we find that the students that will record the testimonials for us are almost never the highest performers. Like we'll help people that get into optho or plastic surgery or dermatology or orthopedic surgery, and they'll get 260s or higher, but they are never the ones that will like record a testimony, like never, even if they started like really low. And so it kind of creates this sort of vibe of like, oh yeah, like the best people, they just did it naturally. What have you seen in that regard?
That's great. That's just great. Because it's like it tells, I think, academic support, and maybe this is something that's like not just medical school, but all over. Like we have to focus on like the middle group, because sometimes we're always focusing on the students who are really struggling, they're failing. And the upperclassmen, they really don't need us. They work for us as a tutor. But we miss opportunities with this middle group that, they're in between. And I think if we put more effort into helping them per se, or maybe we do help them, but there's ways that we can do more outreach to them specifically and make sure that we're always celebrating those students who have a different story and having them serve as a tutor and hiring them instead of always focusing on our top performers as a way to give the other students a different story. Because yeah, it's a great point, because we are always assessed. And sometimes the student feedback is, Dr. Brown, like you're only giving me the high performing students. So therefore, how do I know that what they're saying is even real for me? Like for me. So when we have students who maybe struggled, but yet they passed step one, they passed all their shelf exams, they got a 250 beyond on their step two. And then they can say, okay, that's more real for me. So maybe it's really looking at things just at all levels, because again, we tend to really focus on students who are failing and really underperforming. Maybe an opportunity is missed for the middle group of students to put them more on display that it made it. So that's a great point.
So tell me more about your journey to become the director of academic support. So you've had like a really, like you have such a fascinating history of, you did like K through 12 education for a while, and then
Yeah, ESL. In fact, I think that's when I learned, because I learned that international students, they are some of your highest performing students, albeit not maybe numerically at first, but definitely the most hardworking. So I saw what resilience looked like in my early years of education. And I knew that there was something to that. So it's like, what do I do as an ESL instructor to celebrate that? So I think that is like my framework. How do I celebrate resilience, and what does it really look like? And then after that, I went into like higher education, but then my background is in teaching. So I'm always trying to help students be the very best academically, but also finding out how they learn. So when I got introduced to this environment, at first you're like, well, boy, these are amazing students, amazing just in every way. What is out there to help them get through these very large exams? And so the point is help them learn how they learn, because chances are some students are not exposed to their learning styles. They've never had an assessment. Top performing students probably wouldn't have, right? Like they just wouldn't, because they've never needed, they already, what they're doing has worked for them, right? Like all the whole lives in a very great way, not just a small way, but in very great ways. It has worked for them. So as a learner myself, again, seeing resilience, see what a hardworking student is like, having that as my framework, and then being a hardworking student myself and not even the best student, you know, I, you just know once you have someone who believes in you, who helps you, who meets with you, who guides you, which is what an advisor does. I think that's what really brought me to this environment, because I recognize the power when you have someone that helps you along your way and that meets with you and helps you learn how you learn. I think that's what makes this job so just it's amazing. And the impact that we have in medical school is tremendous. So I think that's what draws me. I'm a learner. I've seen resilience firsthand. I know what that looks like. I know what students are capable of because I've seen that at a very early age. I am a learner myself, and I know the power of someone meeting with you and helping you understand your gifts, your talents, and what you're good at so that that brings you to success.
Some of the best educators I think I've ever met have been from the elementary education space originally. And I think that I've reflected on that. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that you can't skip steps because they don't necessarily come in with any existing skills and their brain is still developing. And so you have to you have to sort of fill every single one of those steps. I would imagine ESL is very similar to that.
Yes. And just what your point is really valid, because everyone has Gartner's multiple intelligence. Like everybody has one. So as a teacher, you're doing stand up all day. You have this lesson plan, but you have to connect it to learning styles and multiple intelligences. How do you do that with like 20, 30 or plus kids? But that's what a teacher does. That's the strategy right there. And that's really what I do now. How do you take almost the impossible, right? Like 30 different students, 25 students, different learning styles, different strengths. How do you take that and help all of them achieve success? That's what a teacher does. A teacher is able to see it all like visually and bring all those pieces together into an effective lesson plan. So at this level, you have all these different medical students who are amazing learners and different learning styles. What resources and strategies can they use? All these different parts, academic support, we help them bring that together to promote success, strategy.
What are the biggest sort of lessons or takeaways from your early childhood experiences that make the biggest difference for medical students in their preparations for med school or USMLE specifically?
What do you do? Like it would be asking myself as a young learner, what do I do when I fail? I remember my first semester at college, like 3Ds. And it was just like one of the toughest, I think, experience early in my college years that I had. And it was like a forced adaptation, a forced adjust, and a forced discovery of what am I doing wrong? Why did I get 3Ds my first semester? And then that's how I can easily help students say, okay, let's look at this. Let's sit down and let's see what you did. If I didn't have that experience, like my first college semester, I may not be as sensitive as I am, because I know what it's like to fail, but I also know what it's like to bounce and to really do a self-evaluation of yourself. And it's ugly sometimes because you're like, man, I'm not really studying, or I'm not using this technique, or I'm not going to tutoring. Why am I not going to tutoring? And it's that same when you think you're a top performer and you get hit with maybe, are you? You get hit with, are you a top performer based on your numerical grade? So because I've had those type of incidences in my academic journey, I can help students, medical students in their journey when or if they don't get the grade that they have worked so hard to get. And then even in the STEP environment, first diagnostic, your first NBME, devastating. Because I've had that experience as a learner, I can help or guide them through it. Because some students need different things. So I've had so many experiences. Up, down, success, not so good. Pain, you know what I mean? It's a lot. It's a lot. But that helps me help students really.
That's brilliant. I mean, it sounds like you, because a lot of people for the first time they're struggling, right, in medical school. And so what would you tell that person that's struggling for the first time, or it's kind of like feels like they've reached their limit, they're kind of doubting themselves, like, am I good enough? Like, can I do this? How would you approach that?
First, remind students that they've never done this before. They have never done anything like this in their entire life. That's a fact. Then, number two, be gentle with yourself because of that. It's not like you've had something like this before ever. I think medical school is a unique environment that students endure, until they get to success. So remind students you've never done this before, so be gentle with yourself. Then number two, be open to adapt and discover how it is or what happened, whether it's, like I said, the knowledge gap, the knowledge crack, the testing issue, whether it is your, like a variety of things. So that's kind of what I would do. Really say to students, you've never done this, be gentle with yourself. Come and see me more regularly. Let's look at your strategy. Let's look at your study plan. Let's look at the vignettes and practice questions, because that's really it. Like, how are students managing all the material that needs to be learned on a daily basis? And how are they assessing that prior to their exam? Because students are like, oh, I read it, I'm good. But it's like, well, what are you using for spaced repetition? What are you using to build your memory and your active recall, which sometimes is the missing link? Students are getting things wrong. I just didn't remember. I'm like, well, what spaced repetition tool are you using regularly? If it's not okay, like, what are you using? 'Cause it's like, yes. So you see how, like, but if you're gentle, you have to be gentle and forthright, like direct as well. But what's your study plan? That's like the golden question. What's your study plan? How are you managing your time? Like, but again, before you even get to that, you're really letting students know it's okay. Be gentle with yourself. I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you succeed. That's really it.
We tell students there's three legs to the stool of learning. There's how you learn it, there's how you remember it, which is like the spaced repetition part, and then there's how you read the question. And just like any stool, if you miss one of the legs, it's still going to fall over. Like, you could have we see a lot of people who they do questions and then come to us. They've filled their tests and they've like, oh yeah, I do a bunch of UWorld questions. Like, yeah, like, what do you do for retention? They're like, what retention? Well, there you go.
And for me, like, that's almost the key, because what is like the learning curve? It is like cause I'm just going over it with the student. In a day, you're at what, 33 or 35% of what you remembered. So it's like, why we need more spaced repetition. If it's not Anki, then maybe it's some kind of running document that you are addressing, that you're looking through every single day. I think that's one of the missing pieces for students, spaced repetition. It's everything.
You've talked a lot about the importance of peer-to-peer learning. When people are learning from their peers, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see people make?
Well, I think one is students, again, they think it's a hierarchy. If you go to someone, that means you don't know something. Because again, you've never had a coach before. You've never needed anything. So just even signing up for a coach, you're admitting that you don't know something or something's missing when it's never been missed or unknown for your entire life. So, and again, it's about how do we present what academic coaching is in medical school, which is meeting with the peer And because they have lived experience, they already know what you need to know. Have a conversation with them. That's how we present this. Have a conversation with them and get more, as I call it, intel. It's like, don't you want just like Mission Impossible or something? Don't you want intel on this course that you're doing, on this exam? Don't you want that? Don't you want to find that out? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, they go get that intel. So again, like it's all about framing it because students again see, oh, I need something. That's needing something's bad. It means a lack. I've never had lack before. So frame it differently in academic support on what your high achieving students can do so that again, they have to build trust with them too, just like we have to build trust with students. So it's a lot of building.
Sounds like kind of like the growth mindset versus like fixed mindset. It's like,
Yeah.
if I reach out to someone, that's a sign that I'm not good enough.
Exactly. That's what happens, I think, all the time. I think more often than people would like to admit. I mean, even for me, I told you, like, my first semester of college was a disaster, a disaster. But I had to first see it for what it is and really be honest with myself and say, if you want to achieve, you're going to need some help. But it was presented to me in a way that I didn't feel like I lost something or that I'm not good enough or that I'm a failure. Because sometimes people will do that. They're like, oh, okay, you don't know, depending on the delivery of the tutor. So we really make sure that our tutors have this casual conversation with them and with our interface, student can say exactly what they're looking for. Because time is of the essence, right? Like time is everything. So it's like be strategic in what you are looking for from that coach. Is it subject? Is it discipline? Is it the third party resource? Is it how to use Anki? What is it so that you can be as narrow and as targeted as possible and use your time wisely? And students, it's when that starts happening and I look at the reports, obviously, because I'm in charge of it, and I'm like, wow, students are really meeting with the tutors. And then if you assess it, like you should be assessing it at the very end of your year so that you can make changes, you can judge, you can say what you can celebrate what is well, and then you could give time to make any adaptations or improvements to how your tutoring program is actually going. Because if the students, they're not coming, then that tells you something, that something is missing, that something needs to be adjusted. But if they're going and you can see it numerically in their grades, oh my gosh, you know that it is that peer-to-peer interaction, the engagement and the delivery of what tutoring is, you know that it's working.
That first semester of college, how did you, what allowed you to really like grow from that? Like what sort of mindset framing, like what allowed you to sort of take that and turn it into like this remarkable growth opportunity as opposed to, kind of going the other
Great
direction?
question. Great question. I knew I wanted to be something. Like I didn't know what at the time because it was, it's your first semester, but I knew that I was going to be something. And so it helped me not give up or slack or not. How about this? It helped me not give my best because, you can get by because, in high school, you kind of get by without giving your very best, like not like school. You can get by with just kind of giving a little bit, in high school and still get the A. Or even like with, but sometimes even in undergrad, like some courses you can still do a little bit and like, oh, I was like, I got a day. But like your major courses, or again, it was my first semester and I didn't take it really as seriously as I should have. I said, but the running factor to your question, the running, like the one thing that helped me the most is I knew I wanted to be something. And for medical students, it's the dream of being a physician and changing lives and being a part of something bigger than themselves. So I always remind students, like, do you know how many applicants come in every year? Do you know that you were selected? And we all start off like that. Like, do you know that you were picked? All of that. And then if the exam doesn't go the way they choose, or the way they want it, they get a lower rate. I always say, do you remember that you were picked to be here? Like you weren't just like, randomly like, no, like we wanted you to be here. And that really helps students remind themselves, okay, I can do this. I have to readjust. I will do whatever it takes. And you remind themselves of their letters that they wrote and all their recommendations and all and like their entire application package. It brings back that memory. And I tell them, like, put that on your wall or something. Because that's what I did. You know what I mean? Like I had all this stuff when I was like in undergrad and getting my doc. Like I had all these things to remind myself that I wanted to be something, I wanted to have an impact, and I knew it was going to be an education. And you need that as just a student in general. I think especially medical students, because there's so many challenges. And it's unyielding. Like it's like challenge, 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 challenge all day, right? I always say that medical students are the most tested individuals on earth besides the military. You're just about tested people on the place on the planet. So it's like you have to remind yourself of who you are and what you're capable of and your goals and why you decided to be a physician in the first place. Because that can rekindle, like that can help you do another 100 cards that night. You know what I mean? Another 100 Anki cards, or that could make you do, if you're in Step World, that could help you do. Maybe it's watch another B&D video. You know what I mean? Like you can go a little bit further when you remind yourself of your goals and why you wanted to be a physician. And for me, I knew I wanted to be something in education. So that pushed me to go forward.
Kind of like that. As we wrap up, one question I like to ask is, what's one piece of unconventional advice that people may not normally hear that you have found makes the biggest difference in people's preparations, either for the USMLEs or for their career?
Yeah, I would tell you a student that struggled when I first came to DuCom, and he was struggling in year 2. And if you don't do so well, let's say on the comprehensive exams, it's really difficult for you to go into dedicated with confidence and just believing in yourselves. And we worked together. We identified what his learning style. He was able to really target the third-party resources that worked for him. And then by the time he was finished, he broke the 60 barrier, got like 65, almost 70 for his last NBME, which was 31. Then he ultimately passed step 1. And he emailed me, which most students do, right? They email like whoever, everybody, and say, I did it. And we're like, yes. But then I said to him, because third years is another mountain with your shelf exams and ultimately step 2. And so I said to him in the email, now you understand that you can do anything. And I could you just know that when you say that to someone and how they respond to it, like they're just that'll change their life. Because I reminded him, like, do you understand now that you can do anything? And when you talk to students like that, when you remind them of what they already did from year 1, oh my gosh, like year 1 was hard, year 2, and then dedicated. Then they're going to year 3. You have to remind students about how difficult this journey is, and yet you persisted. And in academic support, we have to remind them constantly of that. I used to work with elementary school. I was an ESL teacher. When you celebrate students, when they learn a word in English that they thought they forgot, it's life-changing. And then you're there to cheer them on. And I think sometimes we have to cheer our students on, not in a very corny way or superficial way, but in a way that they can grab hold of that and then take off. Because after that, passed every one of his shelf exams, above 250 in his on step 2. Now he's going to be a 4th-year student, but he didn't need me for anything else. You know what I mean? Like he didn't need me for shelves. He didn't need me for step 2 because he grabbed hold of, you know what? I can do this. I can do anything. I don't think you're so bad, and it now he's flying. And so in academic support, we have this special opportunity to not only help students like in a strategic way with their learning style, learning how they learn, preparing them for the NBMEs and all that stuff. Like we really have to encourage students because hardly anyone understands the type of environment that this is. And you have to have sometimes somebody in that environment to remind you that you can do it. It's not impossible. It just seems that way. Hang in there and remind them, are you eating? Are you sleeping? You know what I mean? Because sometimes students give their, are you eating? Are you sleeping? Well, let's look at that differently. That we play such an important role for these students going through this unyielding journey. And we just have to do that. Remind them that they can do this and remind them to get help if they need to speak with someone regularly. Like we have, I think all medical schools do, our schools do. They have wellness services, well-being services. You think taking advantage of those services would be good, reminding them of accommodations, reminding them of different resources without shade, right? Because accommodations, that's like a bad word for top performing people, isn't it? So we have to remind them these services, including myself and my team, are there to help you be at your best. You can do it. You can do the impossible.
Wow, I feel like there's only two groups of people now listening to this. Either people that are at UCOM that are going to schedule a meeting with you, or people that are thinking about transferring. That's if you work your week. If people don't have a Dr. Brown in their life, like what can they do to sort of have that, like, because I mean that's so powerful. What it is that you described, like what can they do?
To like people. Like you have to like people generally, like all people. And you want to see everybody succeed. Like that's the root. Like I learned, but I had people that were like, Stephanie, you can do it. Like in undergrad, like I was in this course and my professor was like, Stephanie, great paper. You should go to grad school. And then there I was, like a year later or two in grad school. Excellent paper, Stephanie. Go and get your doc. And I was like, really? And I was the first graduate in higher education for my immediate family. And so I actually come from that place a lot and really just when someone's doing something well or just I think it's this, really recognizing the power of your words for students, like really recognizing how what you say and how you deliver strategies to them, that makes it or breaks it. So we really have to be mindful about how we say things to students. And it should be rooted in, I want you to succeed.
I'm just thinking of like from the perspective of a student that doesn't have someone like you in their life. How can they, because there's a lot of people that need to hear that message. How can they,
Yeah,
can they cultivate that on their own?
that's a great question. You figure for those students who say, I want to meet with you like every week. And I'm like, yes, yes, yes. But then I'm not, with them when they're studying late at night. I'm not with them during, different hours of the day. And sometimes like my calendar is jammed up. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't even meet with you. So it's like you have to find someone, whether it's a podcast just like this, right? Whether it's something that you can get inspiration. Like who is someone, it sounds corny, but positive affirmations can go a long way. Like make sure you're starting your day with that positive outlook on life despite the challenges that are like in your life. And that's like your well-being, and that's little things that I do because we have services that really do a great job at going further with that. But I always say to students, how do you start your day? Do you start it with affirmations? And I'm big on if students need for students outside, like before I came to DuCom, sometimes like I'm a big superhero. I don't know if you recognize that, but superhero, Marvel, Star Trek, all of that, Lord of the Rings, all of that. So before DuCom, I would send my students sometimes like a meme, or it would be like a video clip, positivity, something like that, where they'd be like, oh, Captain America did that. And like, even in my office, I have this Thanos like horn. And, it has like the fire, not the fire, it has the gems on there. But you know what I did with that? I had year one, like the hands, like year one, year two, step one, year three, step. And so students come in my office and they're like, what are you, a Thanos fan? And I'm like, no, look at that. They're like, oh. And then the middle gem, it's yourself. Always lead students to that middle stone in Thanos' hand and say, sometimes you have to fight against yourself. So it's helping students be really self-aware of, am I eating? Am I neglecting my well-being and my health? Am I really feeding myself positivity so when the fear comes, I have something to kind of fight against it? And academic support, like we should have some kind of positive affirmations in our office and tools and different visual aids that today's students can come in and be like, "Oh, is that the Lord of the ring?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And it's like, "Well, why do you have that in here?" Because, the smallest people, which is the hobbits, they were able to change the world. So little segments like that with students, they're like, yeah. So our words, it means a lot to students, who sometimes their confidence is like on the brink, in this fearful, unyielding environment. It's sometimes the academic support and others around them that can really make the difference. And you have to know that. Like you have to know that about what you do in medical school. I guess in life, but more so we're talking about medical school. So it's like your words are everything. So be mindful of what you say when you're with them. Have inspirational type things in your office because you never know what the students who are coming through your office or stopping by can look at that and say, okay, I got to get back on the horse. And taking advantage of the opportunities when you see students like going down the hallway. Hey, how is everything going? I have a free moment. Do you want to stop by my office? Some students are like, yeah. But some students are like, I'll get back to you. And all those little moments for us in medical school really can make a difference in our students' thoughts about their approach to med school and about reminding them what their goals. It's game changing.
Yeah, so it sounds like if you don't have someone like a Dr. Brown in your life, at a minimum you can curate sort of the sources of influence in your life.
Yes. Yes. And that's why I have like some students who are like, oh, like I said, the Thanos hand, the Lord of the Rings. But then I'm like, you should have something like that in your life, in your room, in your study area to remind yourself of what you're capable of. It may seem silly, it might seem like a little trinket, but it's just a reminder tool to you about what you're capable of and what you can do.
What do you tell to someone who tends to focus on the negatives? Because a lot of medical students, like, they're like, "Oh, I didn't do this." Like, "Oh, man, like, what can someone like that do?
Yeah, first you have to listen. Words are powerful, but first you have to listen to what's being said. So you have to really be an active listener. I think that's a part of advising, right? Like being an advisor, being a counselor, like being in this role, you have to listen because sometimes like what they're saying is pointing you to like the reason or pointing you to maybe it's a well-being concern or whether it's, man, I'm just burnt out, because sometimes it's like I took this test, I was sick. I should have gotten an excusal, but I went forward anyway and took the test and didn't do well. But if you didn't listen carefully, you wouldn't get this student is burnt out. We need to revise their study schedule. I need to talk to their student affairs dean to make sure next time they get an exclusion. Like you have to listen to what the student is saying before you start making, a prediction about what it is that they need. So that's my first advice. Like listen, 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 listen. I think that's like the main thing. And then just again, you need a trinket or something that and to remind yourself of what you're capable of, like to combat the fear and to combat the anxiety that comes with being a part of this environment.
If people wanted to follow you, what would be the best way for them to do so?
Definitely, find me like I'm often booked up, sometimes with my own students, especially like in the evening, because like year three students are, from 6 to 8. So, but I will definitely email. Like I'm an email, I could yeah. So yep, that's how you can find me.
And they can read your books.
Oh yeah. Yes, which are like kind of behind what you can't see. But yeah, my books. And I do because my personality is I just love people and I want to get out there. So I do a lot of like story time, things like that. So if you're in Philly, you might see me at a library or at like an outing, like children related, because I love like teaching students. Again, it's all about like how you communicate to them and wanting everyone to succeed, like just bringing more representation to like in Black history and women's history. So you will see me out there in some kind of festival reading stories and, having this energy and all of that. So you can find me somewhere in Philly, outdoors or in a library.
Dr. Brown, thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your passion, your energy. This was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Excellent. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
What if you could walk into step one already knowing you'll pass? I've watched students transform from failing practice tests to comfortable passes in just 3 weeks. The secret? They stopped blindly copying what worked for others and started using a proven system that actually fits how step one works. In my next video, I break down the exact 10-step framework that virtually guarantees you'll pass, not through luck or grinding harder, but through a systematic approach that just works. Click here to watch how to virtually guarantee a step one pass and get the system now.